Welcome everyone to the webinar. We're going to be covering speed reading techniques today. My name is Paul Nowak and I'm the founder and CEO here at Iris Reading. I think you'll find today's session very helpful, especially if you have a ton of reading that you need to get done. So let's get right into it. First off, I want you to be aware of where you can find the materials for today's session. And you can find them all at irisreading.com/YTS. There's a couple handouts there. And I'll put that link in the chat, but you can find it in the description below. But I'm also adding it in the chat here, just so you know where to find it. And that's where you can find all the handouts for today. We're going to use those handouts for measuring our reading speed. So make sure that you have them at the ready. You don't have to print them out, but just make sure that you have them somewhat available. Let me just post that in. We're streaming on multiple platforms today. This is somewhat experimental. We wanted to see. Usually we do a lot of these through Zoom or GoToWebinar or Microsoft Teams, the various webinar platforms out there, but we figured why not stream it on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. So we're at all those locations. If you go to YouTube, you can subscribe to us at Iris Reading. We'll be doing other lives like this, but also we'll be posting videos on other topics related to speed reading, memorization. If you're not already familiar with some of the work we do at Iris, we teach study skills essentially. And that doesn't just apply to students. Actually, about half of the work that we do here at Iris Reading is focused on corporate training. So if you're at a company and you want to invite us to do a webinar or in-person workshop, feel free to reach out to me. My email is just paul@irisreading.com. Again, that's paul@irisreading.com. Also, if you're at an organization or department at a school, whether it's a university, we also work with high school students. We don't really work much with grade school level students. I guess you could start learning some of these skills when you hit around the age of 12. You want those basic foundational reading skills to be there first before you start speeding up. But it's not just speed that we want to emphasize here. We all know that comprehension is just as important, actually more important. If you're not comprehending the material, then your speed is kind of pointless, right? So we're going to work on both here. Here's what we're going to cover today. So first, what is your current reading speed? You might know things like your typing speed, but not everyone knows their reading speed. And of course, your reading speed, it fluctuates. It depends on the type of material you're reading. You might read this book at a certain speed and this book at another speed, depending on which one is more difficult. But your reading speed also is determined by things like your current level of focus. So some people are like, okay, I need to have my coffee before I really am mentally aware and focused. Some people are more focused later in the morning, some people early morning, and some people are more focused at nighttime. Or some people get into like the afternoon where they feel like, oh, I'm just feeling extremely tired. There's a lot of reasons for why that might be, but we know our reading speed can be affected by all those things. You want to think of your reading speed as not a single number, but more like a range. So we'll measure your reading speed once today, but I would suggest you measure your own reading speed in your own material. And an easy way to do that is just read for a minute and count how many words you read in that minute. And that's a words per minute reading rate. We'll be doing that with some of the material right here. So I highly encourage you to make sure you have that downloaded to your device. And I'll have it displayed on my screen, but I don't know if you're joining us from from a laptop, a mobile phone, or a larger screen. So make sure you have those available. Now, we'll also talk about improving your focus. We all know that sometimes our focus just falls off a cliff. So you ever have that where you're reading and you look up after a page or two and you're like, I have no clue what I just read. I got to go back and reread this now. It can be very frustrating when we lose our focus. It is something you can train yourself and you can improve your ability to concentrate. We'll talk about that. And also how to improve comprehension. We'll have some strategies for that today. How to read faster on the computer screen, which I think many of us are doing a ton of reading on the screen, right? I think it's the vast majority, maybe 90% of my reading is reading on the screen. I mean, I still read printed material too, but you can't print everything out, and we get so much information from our screens that we need to know how to read more efficiently when we're on the screen. So the average person actually reads a little bit slower on the screen. We'll talk about why that is and how we can overcome that, and how to build up your speed with practice. There are drills that you can work on, and we're going to do some of those drills today. And those drills, if you do them repetitively, they can help out your speed. So that's part of the reason why we're doing today's session. My goal is to help you make an improvement in this relatively short period of time. We're shooting for a no longer than 60-minute session. I'll also be available. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, or those of you watching the replay, the recorded version here, you can post them in the comments below, and we will work on getting to those as quickly as we can. Also, we'll address how to read more complex information. It's one thing to be reading, a paperback like this. It's a whole other thing if I'm reading something extremely technical. Maybe it's from a textbook. So we'll talk about that. And our focus really needs to be in 3 key areas as readers. There is your speed. You want to read faster, of course, but we also want to have a decent comprehension, and we also want to retain what we've read. Just noticed on my phone, I got a little notification here of a tornado warning. By the way, I'm broadcasting from the South Florida area. Okay, there it goes. You may have heard that tornado warning that just went off. Shelter in basement. I'm on the 2nd floor of an office building here. Hopefully we're going to be good. If I got a cutout, you'll know. Or if the internet is affected, I apologize in advance. Hopefully we're going to be good. It's expiring in the next 23 minutes, so we should be good here. For those of you joining us live, hopefully this does not turn into a disaster. By the way, this webinar room that I have is not near a window, so if there's any flying debris, I should be fine since I'm in the internal part of this building. Anyhow, so let's get right to it. I was talking about how there's comprehension, retention, and speed. All 3 of these areas need to be as efficient as possible if we're going to be decent, efficient readers. I want to draw a distinction between comprehension and retention because there's a subtle difference. They're related, obviously, but comprehension is what are you understanding the moment you're actually reading the material at the present real-time moment. That's comprehension. Retention is, when you close the book and somebody asks you, what is this about? Now we're relying on our retention and recall of the material. So sometimes, I'm just bringing this up because sometimes your comprehension might be good as you're reading the material. You might have strong comprehension, and then you might have poor retention. You might forget things later on. Nobody has perfect memory, but there are ways to improve all these areas. But I just wanted to draw a distinction between comprehension and retention. By the way, if you're interested in the topic of retention and things like memorization, go to our website, irisreading.com. There is a course that goes very deep into that topic on improving your memory. So let's think about how most people tend to read. You see this dot bouncing around, this green dot? Okay, so most people, when they're reading, they tend to go like this with their eyes, word by word. And of course, sometimes we go back to reread. But basically, there's a few old reading habits that we got to change if we're going to start reading faster and also more efficiently. A few of those habits include things like fixation. So fixation is this habit of going word by word with your eyes. You're perfectly capable of reading groups of words. So if we can start reading groups of words, we can make ourselves more efficient. We'll talk about that today. And there's another old reading habit. Oh, by the way, I should mention this habit of reading groups of words. You already do it when you're driving. When you're in a car, let's say you're taking a road trip to New York City. If you see an exit sign on the highway that says New York City, 3 words, you don't look at each word individually, right? Think about how your eyes are fixated on the road. And then when the exit sign comes up in your peripheral vision, you kind of just glance at it, you fixate it on the sign. And in that one fixation, you read 3 words in a chunk, right? And it's a group of words. And then you fixate it back on the road so you don't crash. So this idea of grouping words, we're perfectly capable of doing this on the page. We're just not used to it. It's an old habit to go one by one. We had to do it when we were little. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and of course, when you're around the age of 4 or 5, 6, 7, that's where you start learning to read and get your foundational reading skills. When she reads, she has to go word by word because there's a lot of words she's not familiar with. She's still pronouncing words syllable by syllable, right? So she might not know what a contract is, but she could sound this out, contract. But for us, so long as you are fluent in English, you see a word like this, and you've seen this many times, right? So you look at it for a split of a second, but you can read groups of words once you gain a certain level of fluency. Now, there's another old habit of going back to reread. We already touched on this. This is something we've all been guilty of, right? Sometimes Sometimes the mind just kind of spaces out, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all had that situation of like, reading a few pages and then all of a sudden we snap out of it like, what in the world am I reading right now? I need to go back and reread all of this. So some people will go back like 25, 30% of the time while they're reading. So we got to cut back on this and improve our focus. And then there's an old habit of, well, something called subvocalization. This is the voice you hear in your head while you're reading. You probably remember when you were little, you had to read out loud, and eventually your teacher says, don't read out loud anymore, say the words silently in your head. By the way, I used to hate reading out loud because English is not my first language. My first language is Polish. And both of my parents are immigrants from Poland. I was born and raised in Chicago, but I grew up speaking only Polish until I was like 5. So I used to hate reading out loud because I would always be messing up on words over and over again. So this habit right here, eventually we start saying the words in our head. You probably notice that you hear voices in your head while you read. And it doesn't mean you're crazy. It's your voice. And this is a perfectly common habit, subvocalization. By the way, if you're hearing other voices in your head besides your own voice, then that's a separate issue. But this is common. And it places actually some restrictions on your reading speed. Speaking of which, and we'll dive deeper into this, let's measure your reading speed right now. So I want you to refer to this document here. I mean, realistically, you can measure your reading speed in whatever you want, but for the purpose of this particular session, you could refer to this one, speedtest1.pdf, and you could find that right over here, irisreading.com/YTS. The link is in the description below and also in the comments. So take a look at speedtest1.pdf. I'm going to have it on the next slide here. You see right here? That's going to help us measure our speed. If you could read this easily, feel free to read from my shared screen. I'm going to take it away momentarily because I just want to give you some basic instructions of what I'd like you to do. First off, if you are reading from my shared screen right here, make sure that you maximize the screen so you can easily read the text. If you cannot, if your screen size is not large enough, then just make sure you have it downloaded, and that way you could zoom in or set the font to, you can't really set the font, but at least you could zoom in on a PDF to make it whatever size you want that's easy to read. We're going to read just for a minute, and I want you to read just the way you normally would. Don't go faster than usual. Also, don't go slower than usual. I want you to read normally for good comprehension. And at the end of the minute, you'll hear my timer go off at the end of the minute. Sounds like that. I'll stop you and you'll take a look at the line where you stopped and we'll figure out what your speed was. But I just want you to read at your normal rate. So I'm going to turn off my webcam during this little exercise. So goodbye temporarily. I'll also turn off my microphone so you don't hear any background noise. Like apparently there's a big storm outside, so you would hear thunder maybe, or things like that. I don't want you to hear that. I'm going to turn off my mic when you start reading. Just read the way you normally would. Here is the article. Go ahead and begin reading. All right, that was a minute of reading. Take a look at the line where you stopped, and let's figure out what your speed was. The way you can do that, if you look at the numbers here, what they tell you are basically the number of words to the end of that line. So if you stopped on the word even here, you see that says 249. That just means from the beginning of the article up to here, that's 249 words. So we read for a minute, your speed would be 249 words per minute. Make sure you jot that down somewhere. Write it down or take a digital note of it. And of course, let's say you read the first 2 paragraphs, you see that extra word right there, that would imply 250. Take note of what your speed was. I'll show you the average in a little bit, But first, if you could do me a huge favor, enter your speed through this quick little survey. If you go to irisreading.com/S1, this link right here, or if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to a quick little Google form where you can enter your speed. And also you see this estimate your comprehension. This is just kind of a guesstimate, very subjective. I'm asking you, while you were reading for that quick minute, was your comprehension decent? Was it poor? How was it? If you felt pretty confident, like your comprehension was good, you might say 80%. If you felt like it was so-so, you might say 70%. If you felt like your comprehension was not that great, you might say 60 or 50 or, I don't know, 57.3%, if you want to be that precise. So obviously it's an estimate. It's not really a objective comprehension score. So enter that information. We like to aggregate that. We actually have thousands and thousands of pieces of data from this. So we like to do that whenever we're doing these sessions. Here is the average, by the way. If you go to, well, this is the average reading speed for the adult populace. It doesn't take into account education. I'll show you the average for that in a moment. But 150 to 250 words per minute, that's the average reading speed. So you might be in that average, you might be above average, or maybe you're below average. Remember, your reading speed, it fluctuates. If I give you something new to read, you might read it a little faster or slower, depending on the difficulty of the material. Now, this average, I want you to know that it's based on material that's kind of middle of the road in terms of difficulty. So when I say middle of the road, what I really mean is if we had to categorize reading materials into, let's say, 3 buckets, easy, medium, and hard, this material right here that you just saw would be medium in terms of difficulty. I think all of us would agree this is not advanced level physics, and it's also not the cat in the hat. So it's kind of middle of the road. This is the average for that kind of material. Now, I told you this doesn't take into account education level. If you're curious, for college educated adults, the average is a little bit higher. It's 200 to 300 in terms of an average. So something to be aware of. You can compare your speed to this or that. Also, when people read on the screen, they tend to read a little bit slower. So it can be more frustrating reading on the screen. And there was a study done a few years ago, and they found the average person was reading around 136 words per minute. About, I think it was 32% slower is what they said on the screen. So we'll talk about reading faster on the screen, but I want to circle back to this habit of subvocalization, because if you think about it, if you're saying all the words in your head, what does that basically mean? Doesn't that mean that you're going to read as fast as you talk? If you say every word in your head, then your reading speed will be about the same as your talking speed. Now, what is your talking speed? Well, it depends. Some people talk faster than others, right? But even so, there's a limit, right? You can only talk so fast. And this is why we want to change this habit. What's faster, your talking speed or your thinking speed? I think all of us would agree that our thinking speed is much faster. Actually, that's part of the reason why our tagline at Iris Reading is reading at the speed of thought, because you can think much faster than you can say the words. Now, what is the average talking speed? Because again, some people talk faster than others, but what is the average? Turns out the average talking speed is the same as the average reading speed. And why is that the case? It's because of this habit. If you're saying all the words in your head, then you're going to read as fast as you talk. And you don't have to say all the words in your head, actually. You can, I'll give you an example of when you're reading, but you don't say the words in your head. When you see a stop sign, you're driving, you see a stop sign. Do you look at the stop sign and go, stop, in your head? You probably don't say those words, that word, right? Or if you saw an exit sign on the highway that said New York City, you wouldn't look at the sign and go, New York City, silently in your head. You would just see it, it would register, and you would get it. So we want to adapt that to the page. Easier said than done, but there's a way we could work on changing these habits. We're going to work on changing them a bit today. But I also want you to know that subvocalization is not something you can just turn off or eliminate, okay? A lot of people, when they look into speed reading, they come across this habit, and some people get hung up on it because they're trying to eliminate subvocalization. That's never going to be the case. All the research I've looked at shows you can't get rid of this completely, but you can reduce it. So I'll give you an example of what we mean by reducing it. When I read, I still say words in my head, but I don't say each and every single word in my head. So if I'm reading a sentence like the boy jumped over the fence, in my head, I might just say boy jumped fence. Now I still see all the other words. I recognize all the other words. I'm just not saying all of the words. So it doesn't mean I'm skipping words. Just like when you see a stop sign, you see it and it just kind of registers. If you didn't say it in your head, it doesn't mean you skipped the word stop. Although you might skip and roll a stop sign, right? So anyway, let's work on making some improvements here. First things first, we got to improve our focus. The easiest way you can improve your concentration while you're reading is to use something to guide your eyes. When you're reading on the printed page, what you could use as a guide is simply your finger, your hand, or your pen. What I mean by that is while you're reading, you would be smoothly going across the page with your hand or a finger, or some people prefer a pen, and that's fine too. The idea here is that you're creating motion on the page, and your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. Anything that moves around naturally gets our attention. That's how we're wired as human beings. So we want to create motion on the page. Your eyes are naturally going to follow. Now, by the way, I want you to know some of the science behind why you would want to do this. There's a reason for it. It has to do with the way that your eyes move. There are two types of eye movements that all human beings have. One is called a saccadic eye movement, and the other is called a smooth pursuit. Okay, let me explain the difference between saccadic and smooth pursuit. The smooth pursuit eye movement happens when things are moving around. So if you're looking out the window and you're tracking a car driving down the road, your eyes would move in a smooth pursuit because that eye movement is triggered by movement. Okay. Now the saccadic eye movement happens when things are not moving around. So if you're in a room like I am, where everything is stationary and I'm just looking around the room, my eyes would move in a saccadic fashion because I'm not tracking any movement. I'm just kind of looking around the room. Let me show you what that looks like. A close-up of the eyes. Apologies for the creepy eyeball here, but this is just a zoomed in eye. This is a saccadic eye movement. You see those quick little stops? I'll show you a smooth pursuit in a moment and you'll see the difference. That's saccadic. That's how your eyes are moving. When you're reading like this, your eyes would move in that manner because there's no movement. But what if you create some movement on the page with your hand, your finger, or if you're reading with a pen? Your eyes are going to move and react to movement with this smooth pursuit eye movement, and that looks like this. Much smoother. You see that? You actually focus more when your eyes are moving in this manner. Let me show you them side by side. So we have on the left, saccadic, on the right, smooth pursuit. Let me play both of these videos and you can definitely tell the difference, right? Very easy to tell, big difference. So, turns out the smooth pursuit eye movement, it lends itself to better focus. What I mean by that is we pay more attention to things that move around, so much so that your eyes actually will move differently when there's movement, okay? By the way, I hear other people's tornado alerts going off and the other, so apologies. I've got my phone actually silenced over here, but for emergency notifications like that, I do get it'll probably go off. Amber alerts, weather-related warnings, things like that. So apologies if you hear one of those notifications. All right, using your hand as a guide, great. It's easy to do if you're on the page, but what if most of your reading is on the screen, right? Nobody wants to be dragging their hand or finger on the screen. I guess, I mean, I could use the back of this pen and it's kind of smooth, so I could use that. You could use a mouse, I guess, but sometimes it's just not practical, right? So let's talk about reading on the screen. I want to talk about an approach you can take if you have a lot of reading on the screen and a training tool that you can use to go faster. So let me take some sample reading material. We're going to use some sample reading material from The Onion, okay? Not sure if you're familiar with The Onion, but if you're not familiar with this publication, their tagline is, as you can see at the top here, The Onion is America's finest news source. So we're going to read this article right here. Snowstorm in Chicago delays hundreds of morning murders. All right, now the article is not very long, but what we're going to do is you're going to copy the text, you're going to paste it into a program called Accelerator. I already did that here. I'm going to show you how this program works. This is a free speed reading tool that we created. And if you go to accelerator.com, that is where you can find it. I'm going to post the link in the chat right now. But again, it's just accelerator as you see it spelled there. Kind of tricky spelling, so I'm just going to type it into the chat, accelerator.com. And here's how it works. Basically, it's going to blink the words on the screen at the speed that you set. And that speed, whatever speed you set, is determined by you. So I'm going to click begin here. The speed, we're going to start with 200 words a minute, which is around average, but we're going to go faster from there. We'll do this multiple times, and we'll go faster each time. But what I'd like you to do is focus in the middle of the screen here. These are the first 3 words of the article. When I click read, you're going to notice the words blinking on the screen at whatever speed is set in the program settings. So we're going to start with 200 and then we'll bump it up from there. So let me turn my webcam off, focus in the middle of the screen. We're going to be reading this article right here. Snowstorm in Chicago delays hundreds of morning murders. Let's try it out. Here we go. Okay, I think you get the idea. And I think for a lot of you, you could probably go faster if we push it a little higher. Let's try that out. Also, I grew up on Chicago's South Side, so I saw this article. I'm like, oh, look at that. I only moved to the South Florida area, around the Miami area, about a year and a half ago. But thought I'd take this article. I'm curious to know, let us know in the comments. I'm always curious to know where people are watching these videos from. So let me know in the chat or the comments below, where are you joining us from? I'm joining from the Miami area, but you might be somewhere else. Let's try going a little faster through another article, and we're going to be using this one right here, ChatGPT, forced to take bar exam, even though dream was to be AI art bot. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. We basically copy and paste the text into the program. I've already done that. We click begin. Let's change the settings here from 200 words per minute to 250 words a minute. Now you may have noticed during the program we had it blinking 3 words at a time. That's something you could change in the settings to whatever you want. You see right here it says 3, the chunk size. Let's leave it at 3, because I think you'll be able to still keep up going 3 words at a time. But we're going to be going a little bit faster. It's going to be 250 words per minute now. Let's try going just a bit faster. All right. So we're going to read this article, ChatGPT forced to take bar exam, even though dream was to be an AI art bot. Let's try it out. Here we go. All right, so that was a little bit faster. Let's try going even faster. Instead of 250, I want to bump it up to 300. See if you could still keep up. If you could still keep up at 300 words a minute, that's double what most people would do. Remember I said the average reading speed on the screen is closer to like 136 words per minute. So let's see if you can keep up at 300 words a minute. We'll take another article here. Let's take this one. American Airlines now charging fees to non-passengers. Okay, so here we go. We're going to copy and paste this text in here. This is a little bit of a longer article. We're going to go 300 words per minute now. I mean, airlines are charging for everything nowadays, right? Let's click begin. I'm going to bump up the speed. By the way, there are some keyboard shortcuts at the bottom here. So if you want to increase your speed, you just use the up arrow key or down to increase or decrease by 25. Another important one would be the space bar. You could use that as sort of like a play and a pause button. So if you miss something, you just hit space. That'll pause it. And then you could use the back arrow key to go back, or you could use the right arrow key to skip ahead. So some other settings right there that you can take advantage of. Let's try going 300 words per minute. So I'm going to bump up the speed here by clicking the up arrow key once and twice. So you see now it's 300. Let's see if you can still keep up at 300 words per minute. Here we go. All right, so that was 300 words per minute. If you were able to keep up, great. And by the way, you can use this tool, Accelerator, as a training tool as well. If you do a lot of reading on the screen, you could use it as a productivity tool, or when I say training, I mean, we just want 300 words per minute. Let's say that was too fast for you. It's okay that we were doing that at 300 because it's still a way to kind of practice and get yourself used to seeing words at a rapid rate. It's not a bad idea to get out of our comfort zone, right? If you think about it, that's how you get better at anything. Isn't that true? Like for me, I used to have a fear, an extreme fear of public speaking when I was in school, even in high school and college. Anytime we had to do a presentation, I would dread getting up in front of my classmates and talking, even though I knew many of my classmates. But I remember just being extremely fearful of this. It wasn't until I started teaching, initially just one-on-one, like tutoring, and then I kind of got over it. As you do something more and more, you push yourself out of your comfort level, and you make progress. So same thing goes with reading, and you can use this as a training tool. Let's jump back to the slides here. You could explore some of the other details behind Accelerator. We are working on turning this into a browser plugin, and also we're working on turning this into an app. Both Android and iPhone. So just something to be aware of. You could always go to accelerator.com to see the latest. Now, let's jump into a quick little question that I think you know the answer to. How do you get better at anything? We all know practice, right? So when we're talking about practice in terms of reading, there's a way that you could go about practicing to improve your reading speed. I've got some basketball imagery on here because I grew up playing basketball. I was been playing since I was like 5. I don't play as much as I used to, but I played up to the college level, Division I, and there's a way that you practice basketball, right? There's all sorts of drills and exercises that you can do. I want you to know that reading is similar in that there are drills and exercises you can do to become a better reader. So let's do one type of drill called a speed drill. Now, the whole point of a speed drill is to purposely go faster than you would normally read. So let me explain how we go about doing that. So the goal here, like I said, purposely go faster. How are we going to go faster? Well, we're going to take material you already read. You see this article right here, Age of Distraction. You already read the first minute of this article. At the very beginning of the session, we read for a minute to measure our reading speed. Now, I want you to look at the line where you stopped. During that minute, maybe you got up to here, maybe you got up to here, maybe it was somewhere over here. Whatever line you got up to in 60 seconds, 1 minute, I want you to get to the same line in 40 seconds, from the beginning to the line you read up to. So basically, I'm asking you to reread what you've already read and just go faster. Shouldn't be too hard to go faster because you already read it, right? So the goal here is to get used to seeing the words at a faster pace. So we're going to do our first drill. It's going to be 40 seconds. Let me put that on the clock here. And I want you to purposely push yourself to go faster than you would normally read. If you happen to have this printed out, or if you don't mind using your hand, finger, or pen as a guide, feel free to do that. I'm not going to force you to do that. Well, I can't force you to do that, but some of you might be joining us on touch screens, things like that. So if it's not convenient to use your hand or pen, you don't have to. But if you do have it printed out, or if it is convenient, I suggest doing it just for the hand-eye coordination. You could think of it as a hand-eye coordination exercise and also an exercise in getting used to seeing words at a more rapid pace. So let me turn off my webcam during this exercise. We're going to go 40 seconds from the beginning to the line that you read up to. If you get there early, just continue reading from where you left off. All right, but you got to start at the top and you got to basically skim what you previously read. All right, let's try it out. 40 seconds. Ready, set, and go. All right, that was 40 seconds. If you made it to your line, very good. We're going to do another drill, but I'm going to give you a little less time. We're going to do now 35 seconds. We're going to do the exact same thing, just a little bit faster. Start back at the beginning, and you got to skim through what you previously read, what you originally read. Remember, during that 60 seconds, the minute of reading we did at the beginning, you got to get through that minute of reading in 35 seconds. All right, let's go a little bit faster. Ready? Let me put 35 seconds on the clock here. Ready, set, and go. All right, that was 35 seconds. If you got there, very good. We're gonna cut the time down to 30 seconds now. So what this means is you got to go at a speed that's about double your normal reading speed. Now, this doesn't mean we've doubled our speed. It just means that we're skimming at a rate that is double our normal rate. So start at the beginning. You got to get through the minute of reading you did earlier in 30 seconds. Okay, let's go a little bit faster. All right, 30 seconds on the clock here. 1 second. All right, are you ready? Set, and go. All right, that was 30 seconds. If you got there, great. We're going to make the drill a little more challenging. Instead of just getting to the line that you read up to, I want you to get all the way down to the bottom, the end of the passage. You got to do the entire passage. I'm going to give you more time, a very, very generous minute and 30 seconds. Now, it's not too generous. I'm purposely giving you a relatively short period of time. I want you to just skim all this text. You're not going to read and understand it fully. I'm assuming there's text down here you haven't read yet, because most people, if you're an average reader, you probably ended up somewhere around here during the minute of reading. I want you to get past that. You're going to start at the beginning. You got to skim through all this text, even the text you haven't read yet. Skim through all of it. And you got to get to the end of this passage in a minute and 30 seconds or less. I will give you a heads up on time. When we get halfway through the time, I'm going to turn my mic on and just say halfway. That way you kind of have an idea of where we are with the time. And if you're not halfway, you can speed up a little bit. Remember, this is not normal reading. This is essentially what I'm asking you to do is to skim. I want you to skim all this text, purposely go faster than you would normally read. And the reason we want to do this is because before we start reading and comprehending at a faster rate, we want to start by just seeing the words at a faster rate. Once we get used to seeing the words faster, then we could layer on top of that, well, how do we comprehend faster? We're just taking it one step at a time. So make sure you're going faster than usual. I'm giving you a minute and 30 seconds to skim all of the text you see on the screen. Ready? All right, let's do this. Ready, set, and go. Halfway. All right, that was a minute 30. Did you make it through the whole passage? Hopefully you did. And if you didn't, here's what sometimes happens. People start off fast because they already read all this, right? So they start off fast. And then they get to the new material like, oh, this is new material. Let me slow down and read it. Don't do that. try to avoid the urge to read. When I'm asking you to do speed drills, I want you to skim. Okay, so let's do one more last drill, a minute and 15 seconds. You kind of go faster than usual from the top to the very bottom, a minute and 15 seconds. Ready, set, and go. Halfway. All right, that was a minute and 15 seconds. If you got there, great. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to normal reading. So I'd like you to refer to the other handouts. Again, all the handouts are available here, irisreading.com/YTS, and the file name is speedtest2.pdf. It's just another document that looks like this. It's by the same author from the same book. So similar topic, but new text you haven't read yet. We're going to go back to normal reading. When I say normal reading, I want you to read at your normal reading speed. So not too fast, not too slow. I want you to comprehend the material. So don't go so fast that you can't understand it. And also don't go super slow either. Go at whatever speed feels comfortable so you can understand the material. We're going to read for 1 minute and then I'll stop you. Okay, so make sure you have this document in front of you, or maybe you're reading from my shared screen. Again, it's speedtest2.pdf. Let's go ahead and get ready to read. Hopefully you have this in front of you. Ready, set, and go. All right, that was a minute of reading. Take a look at the line where you stopped and figure out your speed. And I'm curious to know if you made an improvement. It's not uncommon for people to make improvements after this first set of drills. Actually, if you did make an improvement, you could let us know in the chat or comments below what your starting speed was, what your ending speed was. I'd be curious to know. You don't have to share the information. I know some people are kind of self-conscious about their reading speed, and that's fine, but take a look at what your speed was, and if you made an improvement, awesome. That's why we have this success baby slide over here. If you made an improvement, great. Now, I want you to know how these drills work, but also if you could do me a big favor, remember that form from before? If you could go to the same form, irisreading.com/S1, and enter your speed, again, estimate your comprehension. We'd be curious to know, we like to aggregate that data. So we'd appreciate it if you could add your data there as well. And here's how these drills work. You basically want to be going at a speed. When you're doing these drills, you're going faster than usual, right? I like to compare it to being on the highway. It's sort of like, when you're on the highway, you're going 70, 80 miles an hour. Now, how does it feel when you get off the highway? Doesn't it feel kind of slow? Now, why does it feel so slow? I think it's because you got used to going much faster, right? So you might be on the highway going 70, 80 miles an hour. You get off the highway, sometimes you're still going 40 or 50 and you don't realize it because you got used to going much faster. Think of these speed drills the same way. It's like being on the highway. You're pushing yourself faster than usual. So if you're an average reader, you might be reading at 200, but practicing the drills around 400 words a minute. Well, when you get off the highway, so to speak, and now you're going, I don't know, 250 or 300 words a minute, it's not going to feel as fast as it used to. That's the idea here. And we can work on improving comprehension. Let's talk about that. I want to make sure before we end the session, we discuss comprehension and how you can make more improvements too on your own. So stick with us. We're going to talk about that as well. How to improve comprehension. Here's a simple way to do it. You want to change up your speed when you're reading, slowing down at certain points and other points, speeding up. So again, if we could borrow the analogy of driving a car, if you're driving and you're going to make this turn here, you're probably going to slow it down, right? And if there's no traffic and you're on the highway, you speed up. When should we slow down and speed up when we're reading? Let's say you got some text like this, or any kind of text. A good rule of thumb to follow is to slow down on the first sentence of each paragraph. Why? I think you know why, right? The first sentence is usually what? Usually it's the main idea or the topic sentence, right? So if we slow down there and speed up, that can get us into a nice reading rhythm. So for example, this article is titled India's Skills Famine. Let me zoom in on that first paragraph. Here's the first paragraph of the article. The economic transformation of India is one of the great business stories of our time. Sounds like a main idea to me. I take that and now I try to run with it. Going a little faster now. I get to the end of the paragraph. I'm going to slow it down now. I'm going to apply the brakes. Here we have another sentence that reads, but India has run into a surprising hitch on its way to superpower status. Its inexhaustible supply of workers is becoming exhausted. Interesting. Now we get to the next paragraph. How is this possible in a country that every year produces 2.5 million college graduates and 400,000 engineers? Interesting. Next paragraph. There was a time when many economists believed that post-secondary education didn't have much impact on economic growth. You see how all these first sentences are giving us a ton of information? Look at the next one here. The irony of the current situation is that India was once considered to be overeducated. Huh, that's interesting. Like, how could a country be overeducated? That's a good thing, no? So we get our details now. Next paragraph. Since the Second World War, the countries that have made successful leaps from developing to developed status have all poured money, public and private, into education. So what we're trying to do here is take that main idea, go a little slower there, and now we try to run with it. So we go a little faster. We're going to get our details about South Korea and other countries here. Next paragraph, we slow it down on the first sentence. India has taken tentative steps to remedy its skills famine. The current government has made noises about doubling spending on education, and a host of new colleges and universities have sprung up since the mid-1990s. You see how all those first sentences give you a ton of information? I wanted to read all of them out loud to demonstrate the point, something we all know, that first sentence is usually the main idea. But also, when you change your speed, it forces you to pay attention. And that's key. If we want to comprehend, we got to be paying attention, right? Good way to trick yourself into paying attention is to change up your speed. So think about this. When you're driving around a big city like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, wherever, you're constantly changing up your speed, right? In a city-like environment, slowing down, speeding up, sometimes stopping. What if you're driving through a rural area? Middle of nowhere, you're on a straight road, there's no stop signs, no lights, you're just going to be on this road for the next half hour. In which situation are you paying more attention? Driving in a city or driving in the middle of nowhere on a rural road? When you're driving in a rural area, you're going about the same speed. Your focus, yeah, you are focused because you don't want to crash, right? Or like run into a deer. But your focus in a city environment is much higher because you're constantly changing, slowing down, speeding up. Constantly changing your speed forces you to pay more attention. And isn't that also true when people speak? Have you ever had a teacher or a professor that spoke in a monotone voice? Can you imagine if you came to this session and I spoke like this, like, hello everyone, my name is Paul Nowak, and today we're going to be covering speed reading and comprehension strat. It would be hard to pay attention if I spoke in that manner, because a monotone voice, there's no change in the speed, right? A monotone voice is very consistent, and the fluctuations of speed or even the voice level, a monotone voice, the fluctuations of the voice level don't go up and down. It's pretty constant. So that change of speed helps with attention. Keep that in mind when you're reading. When you're reading, you want to be changing up your speed because that'll help you to improve your attention while you're reading. Now, one other thing to note here, I purposely read all these first sentences to demonstrate one other point, something very, very important as a speed reading strategy. And this is very important. Before you read any kind of informational material, you should always inspect what you read. Excuse me. You should always inspect what you read. What I mean by that is get familiar with something before you read it. And this is very easy to do, but how you do it depends on the material. If I'm going to inspect or get familiar with something like this, I'm going to read the first sentence of each paragraph. Why? Because I know that's probably where all the main ideas are. So I'm going to read the first sentence of each paragraph first, and then I'm going to read this entire article. Think about it this way. I already read those first sentences out loud to you, right? You already know it's about India. They're talking about education, the economy, a shortage of skilled labor. If you had to read this now, you would read it faster than you otherwise would have. Also, you'd have better comprehension for obvious reasons, right? If I know what I'm getting myself into, I'll have a little better comprehension. And that is the idea behind inspecting. Now, how you inspect the material depends on how it's formatted. For this article, I would read the first sentence of each paragraph. For something in a book like this, or maybe a textbook chapter, when it's more complex, we got to approach it differently. The way you inspect a chapter or a journal article or a report, you start by reading the intro for obvious reasons, and then headings and subheadings, bold-faced words, things that are in italics. Really what you're doing when you're inspecting a chapter is you're just kind of casually flipping through and reading anything that pops off the page. Now, I have headings every so often in this text right here, little heading over there, and there's headings on every few pages we have a heading. So I'm just getting the structure of the material. I don't have any bold-faced words there, but if you did, you'd read those. If there are any diagrams, charts, figures, pictures, we'd read the titles of those charts, figures, or diagrams. When I get to the end, I'm going to read my conclusion. And also, if I have questions at the end of a chapter, which is sometimes the case, like remember when you were in high school, your teacher had you do, read chapter 4, but for homework, make sure you do the questions at the end of chapter 4. Well, I would read my questions at the beginning before reading the chapter in its entirety. So when you do this, again, this is the idea of inspecting. You get familiar with your material. Here's the intro. I'm going to read this whole intro. Next page. This is where my eyes are going to read all the headings and subheadings, bold-faced words. Next page, I'm just reading the title of the table. Next page, subheadings, bold-faced words, and we just repeat all the way to the end. We read the conclusion, then we go back to the beginning. And since I already read this, I'm just going to start here. And now, even though this might be very technical information, I'm going to have a little bit of an edge because I know what it's going to be about. That is the whole point behind inspecting before you read. And then, of course, you get to the next step. Well, this is actually part of an acronym, IRIS, the name of our organization. IRIS is an acronym for how you would approach material, and it starts with an inspection and then followed by read the rest of the material. And then when you're done reading something, a quick thing you can do that enhances your comprehension and retention is to inquire about what you just read. When I say inquire, I mean ask questions. So questions can be things like, what are the biggest takeaways? Or if I'm a student, I'm asking questions like, what's going to be on the test or on the quiz? And these questions, they help focus the mind. Other questions might be, what do I got to memorize for this test or quiz that's coming up? That leads us to the final step here, store. How am I going to store this information? And by the way, we don't have time to get into it on this particular session, but if you're interested in the topic of memory and retention and how to memorize information, go to our website, irisreading.com, and you can check out one of the courses there that go very, very deeply into the topic of improving your memory. Now, you could also do a speed drill here. Let me explain how you could do these on your own. We did a little bit of them today in the session, but you could practice these on your own. Or if you go to our website and take some of the advanced courses, we do a lot of guided drills, not just speed drills, but other exercises as well. And the way you could do the speed drills on your own, the goal is to see words at double your normal speed. So that means if you're an average reader at 200 words a minute, you practice at 400 words a minute. So you can get to something like 250. If you're already reading at 250, you practice at 500. So you can get to something like 300. And when I say get to something like 300, I mean reading at 300 words a minute, but actually understanding and comprehending the material. If you're at that level, you double it up when you're doing these drills. That's how we can build up our speed. Remember that highway analogy that I gave you. If you're going 70 miles an hour, all of a sudden 40 miles an hour doesn't feel that fast anymore. So these drills, you could factor it into this process, but you got to time yourself when you read. So if you read your chapter and it took you, 20 minutes, well, then your drill would be 10. You're basically going back to the beginning and skimming what you just read in half the time. Let's say your chapter was shorter. Maybe you only read for 12 minutes. Okay, fine. Then your drill is actually going to be 6 minutes. Or if you read a short article that was 4 minutes, you can do a 2-minute drill. You can even do those drills with that accelerator program. So as far as storing goes, like I said, if you're interested in that topic, go to the website, irisreading.com. That's where you can find a whole course on how to memorize and store information. But one other thing I wanted to mention, if you are interested in if you are interested in this topic of focus, and the passages that we read earlier in the session, they were on that topic, right? Remember, Age of Distraction. It's all coming from, these are extracts from this book here, Focus, A Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. If you want me to email you the copy of this book in PDF format, shoot me an email. My email is just paul@irisreading.com. and I'll send it to you. The author has given us permission to freely distribute this book. It's a quick read. It's about 100 pages in length, but I think it's got a lot of great tips on how to improve your focus so you can be more productive. Now, so shoot me an email if you want me to send you that, and I'll just reply with the PDF. Also, if you're interested in our advanced courses, you go to this link right here, irisreading.com/courses, and that's where you can find, I'm just putting it in the chat here, that's where you can find courses on improving your reading speed. We have comprehension strategies included as well in the courses. Hang on one second, I'm just putting this link in all the chats here. And if you're interested in the topic, like I said, of improving your memory or even note-taking, you might be familiar with some of the basic note-taking techniques. There are some more unique techniques that you might find helpful. There's also a course on personal productivity. So if you're interested in any of those courses, you can use my name, Paul, as a promo code, and that'll give you an extra 30% off. So I just wanted to mention that in case you're interested in diving deeper into any of these courses. Also, if you're not interested in the courses and you just want some free content every so often, and not every so often, but weekly, we'll be posting new videos on YouTube. So don't forget to subscribe. It's down below if you're watching us on YouTube right now. We've been streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So I'm not sure where you're joining us, but if you go to LinkedIn on YouTube, that's where you can find us. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. Just let me know that you were in the session. I've also got my Instagram on here if you want to follow me there. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I hope you found today's session helpful. If you want to bring us to your company or your school, you could also contact me and we'd be happy to do a session on site. We have various programs that we do, whether it's at the corporate level or at the college level or even at the high school level. So feel free to reach out. Thank you all so much for attending and have a great rest of the day. Take care.